Hi and welcome to Lights of the Round Table. My name is Susanna, and boy, do we have some incredible guests. I have Amanda back on from Amanda, JoanOfHeart. She has done some great documentaries, and we're going to continue our journeys with the UFO disclosure kind of topic today. But I want to introduce you to Robert White. Robert was 3 years old, I believe, 3 or 4 years old, when he actually had an encounter right in his backyard, and the story just gets better and better. But I just want to let you know that Robert has a channel on YouTube, and it's called The Order of Light, the new era of contact. And what an incredible story he has. And he's been sort of in the grassroots levels, pioneering this kind of theme for the last few years. Robert, thank you so much for being with us. And Amanda, again, what a pleasure to see you. I thank you for coming and introducing us to Robert.
Thank you so much for having me here. And yes, I have my YouTube channel, Robert Earl White, Order of Light. I have my story, my family story that I will be talking about today on there. Also, New Era of Contact, or what I started off as We Are the Disclosure, hashtag We Are the Disclosure. There's a lot of people out there using it, but I'm the one that created it, and others hijacked it and they're using it for their own thing now. But We Are the Disclosure. I changed the name to New Era of Contact because go ahead, let them. I have tons of different names I can come up with. And I'm helping a lot of people get out there, people that no one's ever heard of before, people that have no social medias. They don't have Facebook. They don't have TikTok. They don't have any of this stuff. I'm just helping everyday real people come out, share whatever they saw, whatever they experienced, near death experience, a spiritual experience, seeing their grandmother's ghost walk around them experience. This is what I'm doing, regardless of what it is. No one on this planet knows better how it feels to have something actually happen to you and no one believe you. So I've made it my mission to help others that have had experiences to come forward and share them. But I'm only one person, so it's a lot of work. But yeah, and that was a lovely introduction. And I guess to just get right into it, a little background before I start to tell my family story. You
Yeah.
know, I grew up in southern New Jersey, out in the country, not like upstate New Jersey, like New York City. I grew up in the country. I hunt deer. I had a pet deer. We muskrat hunting. We lived in a creek. We lived off the land. We had a garden. No neighbors. The closest town was 25 minutes away. Just to give everyone an idea, off of the Delaware River in southern New Jersey. In later years, I became a pastor. I went to Bible college. I became a youth pastor. I was into youth ministry, and also I was a worship leader, meaning I was very into music and playing the worship music for the churches. After I graduated, I started a heavy metal Christian band. We got signed, we toured all around the country, etc. Blah, blah, yada, yada, yada. That band was I Am History. The album name was Visions on CI Records, coming out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. My band was actually from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. That's where I went to college at, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. After the whole band thing, I ended up going to the Middle East where I studied the Quran, Islam. I lived in the heart of Mesopotamia for 2 years in Turkey, right on the Black Sea. I got to learn things and see places that most people cannot possibly comprehend, including Göbekli Tepe, 12,000-year-old site. So, and many other places. After I came back to the US, I just needed a job after 2 years. I started working at commercial frame and door, like frames and doors, moving doors all day. I'm a big guy, 6'8", 6'8", very big guy. So I was moving doors and frames all day long. And I was just doing what I needed to do because I've always known that someday I would find evidence of what happened to my family when I was only 3.5 years old. You were correct. You said 3 or 4. I was actually 3.5, right in the middle. So that was perfect.
Hmm.
But for a long time, we didn't have evidence. It was covered up by the military complex, by the government, and by men wearing black suits. I'm not even going to say it. We all know who they are now, but this is 1991, April 21st on a Sunday at 10:18 p.m. 1991 is before the show X Files. 1991 is before the show Men in Black. 1991 is before a lot of things that you'll probably end up hearing in my family story. Long story short, as I was a warehouse manager working these commercial doors and frames, shortly after, my mother unfortunately passed away in March 2020. And it was really hard because of the pandemic. The pandemic that was going on just started when my mother passed away. So I couldn't have a funeral or anything like that.
Yeah.
And she went to her grave never seeing the UAP footage that the Pentagon released. The same week they released the Pentagon UAP footage, I found 6 pages of evidence and articles on my family's UFO case 30 years later. And 2 months too late, 2 months prior, my mother, that suffered even more than what I did going through this experience, never being able to talk about it without being ridiculed, mocked, etc., not having evidence. It was 2 months after she passed away that I finally found the rock hard, solid evidence, police reports, military transcripts, Philadelphia News, they were on those transcripts. Other witnesses started to come forward. When I first found the articles, I made a small 15-minute documentary going over 3 pages, not even all 6, just 3 pages of the evidence. The video ended up getting 90,000 views on YouTube. I didn't know what I was doing. I was wearing a Call Heart shirt. I'm a country boy. I didn't care. I've been waiting 30 years. I've never made a video in my life. And it was my very first video I ever put together and made. I said, I've been waiting my whole life, and I always made a promise to myself if I ever found evidence, I wouldn't stop until the whole world knows this story because it is the Roswell of New Jersey. Unlike Roswell, there's also alien abduction and alien encounters, which takes it to a whole nother level. I personally believe that my family story is far more valuable than Roswell. Also, my family story, because of the visitors we had, one gentleman in the Air Force, 2 gentlemen wearing black suits. I believe from the questions my mother asked these men that it provides information on what they would be doing continuing forward. And I think why my story hasn't hit the mainstream. I just recently had Laura Eisenhower on my show, and she said, have you been on History or Travel Channel or anything like that?" I said, "No." She goes, "What? Your story is the one story that's like so mind blowing, but no one's ever heard of it." Yeah, because that's what they want. Because my story completely destroys the UFO narrative. It completely destroys how they're producing it in the media. It also tells you who is controlling the UFO extraterrestrial narrative, who has the most to gain from it. And it's simple: military complex,
Y-
not the people.
Yeah. Now you just mentioned something very interesting. You had people, you so this was years ago, 30 years ago or so. Your people show up, the black man and the military. And what you just gave away is that apparently they had a plan to continue monitoring you. And were you like was your family like a testing sort of? I mean, you seemed like you were going to be followed because they visit you and they were planning to continue visiting you or keeping eyes on you or something. I mean, your family was being monitored apparently because that's what you just hinted, right?
Yeah, and my
It,
mom played the script. My mom did what she was told.
and what was she told? I'm
And
sorry.
well, I'm going to have to go through the actual
Yeah.
experience before we get into
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah,
But
yeah.
You're very observant, and I haven't even told you what happened, but you've already put it together. And although I was unaware, they've definitely kept tabs on me. And for one little small example, when I came back from the Middle East after living over there for 2 years, I had to fly from Turkey to Qatar. Qatar. When I landed in Qatar, I had men in hijab, white hijab, full gowns, questioning me if I was a terrorist. Then, when I landed in Philadelphia in the United States, I was taken off a plane, tons of Middle Eastern people. I was taken off the plane, questioned as a terrorist. I had no issues. Once I talked to the officer, he's like, "You're not a terrorist." He knew. But at that moment is when I realized, because the United States government didn't know where I was for 2 years. I was in the Middle East for 2 years. They had no idea what I was doing. And it wasn't until that point that I realized they got eyes on me. And that's why they noticed I was missing. And they wanted to keep tabs on me and find out what was I doing over there, because I could be learning things that could cause a lot of problems.
Wow.
Can't have no one learning anything, can't we?
Yeah, that's right. So before we go to continue with your story, I'm just wondering, Amanda, how you came to meet Robert. Can you tell us a little bit about the story, please?
I went to Orlando for the Galactic what information what was it again?
The
One of those
Orlando
events.
conference.
The Orlando conference. I went to I went to the Orlando conference, and everybody's just kept pointing at him and, hey, he's got a real good story. Do you know who that is? And I'm like, no. So I went up to him and started talking to him, and we hit it off and became good friends there. And he's just, down to earth, really nice person in general. And yeah,
And
and
so
kind
and
of
so
came
you
back.
used it, and so you did a documentary. You were doing your documentary, and so you actually did interview him, and that's how you
Yeah, he will be in my documentary. It'll be called Awaken and Unite: Inside the Great Awakening. And he's in the part one, which is on the UFO and disclosure movement and the spiritual uprising and movement. So, yeah. And then
great,
part two goes into all the fraud and everything going on and all the censorship stuff that nobody wants to talk about.
great.
Or the
Well, now
media doesn't want to talk about. So,
yeah, great. I just wanted to establish a little bit of that. So, Robert, continue with your fascinating story, please. It's just
Yes.
great.
And so before we start this UFO crash story, because that's exactly what it is, Amanda's interview with me, something actually really beautiful. The whole time I was there, something happened and I didn't know it was happening. She showed me after. I had glasses on. I was trying to be a tough guy, but it choked me up. And something really beautiful happened when I was talking about my mother that passed away. As I was talking about her, there was this white swan that was behind me walking on land. I had no idea. I was looking in her camera, and as soon as I mentioned my mom, Amanda recorded this. That swan took off, and she showed me how. I was like, oh man, she got me good, and it was beautiful. But thank you so much, Amanda, for having me on. So, with no further ado, this UFO crash story. Well, this took place in southern New Jersey, not far from the Delaware River, not far from the Salem County nuclear plant. This was April 21st, 1991, on a Sunday night at 10:18 p.m. My aunt that lived directly next door, we lived out in the country, not a lot of houses around us. It was my mother, my grandparents' house, and my aunt's house directly next door. Behind our house was the tree line, and off to the left, there was a road that led to a one car at a time, an old wooden bridge. And it went over the lower Alloways Creek. And the lower Alloways Creek is the name of our town. And the same creek behind our house, directly behind my aunt's house and my house, we had a line of trees. Over that line of trees was the lower Alloways Creek. This bridge that you see behind me, this is that old wooden bridge that I was talking about. This is that exact bridge. It's closed to this day. It's closed. The road is closed. It's been closed since the UFO crash. Put that out there. I've documented this. It's all written down. It's all there. So, and you see this, there we go. See that tree line? That
Yeah.
tree line right there? Our house is my aunt, and my house was right over that tree line. And this is the area where a craft that looked something like this exploded. So it was 10/18, April 21st, 1991. My aunt directly next door was getting ready for bed. She was in the second story of her house getting ready to go to bed. She went to the bathroom, and as she was getting ready to use the bathroom, she looked out her back window, which was facing the direction of this creek you see here. She noticed this object hovering above the tree line, maybe two telephone poles, a telephone pole to give you height of how high. And this tree line you see back here, it was much lower 30 years ago. They've grown higher. But back then, it was about a telephone pole or two above the tree line. Also obtained in the reports that I've gathered, the cloud coverage was 1,200 foot. It was raining the night of the incident. There were clouds. All right. So you cannot call this a meteorite or anything like that. It was raining. All right. So this object, she's looking at her bathroom window and she sees an elongated triangular craft with three blue lights on the tips of it and a bright white light coming from the center of it. Very, very similar to the craft you see up there. And she's seeing this. It's completely silent. It's not moving an inch. And she's just really perplexed. What could that be? She walks back into her bedroom, picks up the landline. 1991, cell phones didn't exist back then. You know, you had your phones on your walls and you had a line. Picks up her landline, calls my mother directly next door. At the time, my mother and two of her girlfriends were watching a Phillies baseball game. All right. And they were sitting in on the couch in the living room. My mother hears the phone in the back of our house facing this area's direction. And that's where we had our telephone in our kitchen. And my mother heard the phone ringing. She gets up from the couch. She goes back to the kitchen to pick up the cell phone. She picks it up and it's my aunt next door. And she says, Beth Ann, there's something hovering in the backyard above the tree line. Look. My mother looks at it, and my mother really loudly screams, "Oh my God, what is that? What is that?" At that point, her two girlfriends heard my mom freaking out, screaming, "Oh my God, what is that?" And they were sitting in the living room. They could see her looking out the back window, seeing the same object. Her two girlfriends, and they were all young. My mom was 22 years old, single mother. My aunt next door, 38 years old, single mother. My mom's two friends were around 23 and one was 26. All right. Just to kind of give you a understanding of young women. You know, both of you were young women once. And just imagine this happening to you at that age. How would you react? That's what was going on. So I was 3.5 years old. I was upstairs in my bedroom on bed. I heard the commotion. I heard them all running through the house, and my bed was right underneath the window. If I stood up on my bed, I could see it. But I'm not going to talk about what I saw. I was only 3.5 years old. Let's talk about what the adults saw and what was documented. So, with that being said, the two girls run up. They run to the back of the house. Like, what is it? What is it? The whole entire sighting took about 5 to 6 minutes. And then as they were watching, there we go, this craft right here, all of a sudden, a white ball of light or a beam of light, I don't know what it was, something really fast, a ball of light, a beam of light, some sort of light source came and struck this craft all simultaneously. This all happened at once. Imagine light, red and orange sparks, and then the center this white light actually imploded. It sucked itself onto itself. And then the outskirts of the craft exploded like you would imagine a normal explosion to happen. But that core right there sucked itself right into itself. It was unlike anything I've ever seen. It exploded. Whatever this was here went directly down to the creek area that you see behind me in this photograph. This is the exact location. And when that happened, my mother instantly hung up the phone and she called 911. Regardless if this is
Right. Reaction.
extraterrestrial, military, civilian, you see a aircraft that large, completely silent, not making a noise, not moving an inch, with lights on it that you've never seen before in your life. Plasma, a light source that is indescribable. You can't describe it. It was blinding. That center light right there was blinding. The blue lights on the tips, they were okay. They weren't that bad. But whatever that white light in the center was blinding. And when this thing exploded, we actually we ducked a little bit. We thought debris was going to hit us. And I explained to people, have you ever watched fireworks? You go to the fireworks, a big firework explodes. Oh, we're going to get hit. We're going to get hit by this firework. But the pieces never hit you.
Yeah.
That's what it looked like to us. We
Mm.
thought we were going to get hit by pieces because where it was, but we didn't get hit by pieces. But as I said, my mom called 911, and what happened after that has been known as the Lower Alloways Creek incident. And that's after my mom made that 911 call. She was smart enough. She did not report it as a UFO. She called 911. This is on the police transcripts, the 911 call. She said some sort of aircraft just exploded behind our house. Please send help. That's all my mom said. Phone up. And what happened after that, a whole nother can of worms. So if you have any questions, because what I'm about to get into now is really the heart of the story, because at this point it's just an aircraft that exploded behind her house, which is still really remarkable. And it's funny how much this story gets pushed
Deeper.
down there.
Uh-huh. Well, so you are telling me that you do actually remember that the light source in the middle imploded. Do you
Yes.
actually remember that? That must have been quite an impact then. And no sound. Was there any sound?
No, absolutely
It was just
not.
a light
Zero.
show. Wow.
And not moving. And it was it looked like a black metal, like a rock. You know how a rock isn't like smooth? Like
Yeah.
our military has UFOs. All right, a little fun fact: my stepfather works for Space Force, Air Force, etc. We have UFOs. SpaceX has flying saucers. We have them too. But the difference of this one and versus a lot of people, it was a TR-3B. It was a TR-3. No, the TR-3B, the Navy has patents on it. It's rounded. It's rounded. It's a perfect triangle, and the corners are rounded, and they use different light colors. This was not rounded. This was as a triangular shape, but as long as a big military helicopter. It was very thin, and it was hard because of that bright light to really see the material it was, but it didn't seem super flat and black. It seemed more like a meteorite. If you've ever looked at a meteorite, it kind of seemed like that uneven material, like a rock, a meteorite just hovering in the sky with three blue lights and this crazy white light in the center of it. And it did indeed implode. It didn't move. It was completely silent, and there's a lot more to it. And if
Wow.
Amanda had any questions, that was a great question. And Amanda, up to this point, do you have any questions?
Well, the nuclear thing, I'm sure they were drawn to the nuclear spot you had said, correct?
Yes,
Well,
absolutely. And now that you mentioned that, I should put this in here. I'm glad a lot of people miss that part of it. They get so wrapped up in the story. This creek, this bridge, this creek, Lower Alloways Creek, is directly connected to the Salem County nuclear plant. It's visible from this bridge, very visible. And have discovered reports 5 years prior of blue lights flying around the nuclear plant in 1986. I have those reports. Those reports were done by the same MUFON, Mutual UFO Network investigator that did my family's case. He was on to it in 1986. And Dover Air Force Base across the river patrols the nuclear plant, not McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey. A lot of people say, oh, Fort Dix. I have their transcripts. They had no idea what it is. It's not their jurisdiction. It was Dover Air Force Base working with the Coast Guard, which will come into play later, and the Lower Alloways Creek Fire Chief, which was my cousin Calvin Hill. And it gets a lot deeper. So, to continue with this story, and I've told this so many times, but I think I'm going to tell the same story, but in a different order. So, I would like to go over what happened and how I obtained this information. Let's talk about the crash site. I'm not going to talk about right now what happened at my house, the strange people that showed up. Not right now. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. 10:18, my mother makes the 911 call. And I will tell you this, 10 minutes later, the police show up at my mom's house. They take initial statement, very brief. Where, what, and when. Okay, bye. To my aunt's house, where, what, and when. And then the police went on. I don't know what the police did after that. I don't have that paper trail. I have no clue, no idea. But that's what happened 10 minutes after my mom made the 911 call. Well, I do know after releasing the first part of my documentary, releasing the evidence, I had witnesses that were at the firehouse the night of the crash. We lived out in the middle of nowhere. We had no bars. We had no stores. We had no diners. All the young people in the area, when they wanted to go party, have a good time, or they just didn't want to sleep and hang out with people, it was the firehouse. It was the local teen hangout. A lot of the firefighters were pretty young and they were partiers themselves. I'm just being real, and that's the neighborhood we lived in. The firehouse was where the party was always going on, and there was always someone there because they always had to be there. So it was the one place in town you could always find another human being to talk to in a place with very few. With that being said, there were two women that were there that came forward after I released it, and they filled in the rest of this story. So my mom made the call at 10:18, 10 minutes later, so say 10:38, the police came. It took the firefighters, it was a Sunday night at 10:18, took the firefighters about 40 minutes to get to the crash site. So you could say around 11 o'clock ish, they were coming up to the crash site, right around 11 o'clock ish. It may be 5 minutes before, 5 minutes after. As the firefighters were going down this road you see here, back there, which is closed to this day, over here there's a lot of foxtails. And as the firefighters being high up on their truck, they got a good view. And this was in April. So the foxtails and the grass, that was all very low. So they could really see the creek and the mud and the water in the marshland. As they were approaching, they noticed that a lot of it was all gouged. They used the word gouged out, you know. There was crevices and a lot of weird stuff going on. They didn't see any signs of smoke, no signs of fire or any, which that's really, really weird. All right. I don't know of any craft, even a drone, if it explodes, there's going to be burns. There's going to be fire marks. Side note, as they're approaching this, as they were approaching this bridge, coming this way to this bridge you see here, in the water in this area, they saw a Coast Guard cutter boat, a big Coast Guard boat. And off to the left over here, they saw black tarps laid out over the marsh. Black tarps. And they're like, this is strange. Then they saw a gentleman in the Coast Guard. He was armed. He had a rifle. In the Coast Guard, standing right in the road right there, flagging, waving down the firefighters. They slowed down. They're like, is everything okay? What's going on? The Coast Guard guy said the situation is under control, and he ordered the firefighters, my cousin Calvin Hill and two other men, to turn back around, and that's what they did. They went back to the firehouse, the two women I was telling you about. The firefighters get back there like something really weird was going on. Something weird. They weren't talking about aliens and UFOs. We're religious Christian country folk. If it's not about Jesus, it ain't worth talking about. That's where we come from, okay? And so they just say that was really weird. Something weird's going on down there. These two girls, country folk, we're in everyone's business, right? We got to know everything. If something happens in a small town, you know how the women are. Like, that's how it goes. So the one woman gets in her car. She goes to the site. She goes there. And this would have been around 11, yeah, 30-ish, 11:30-ish. She goes to the site, and they have the road closed at this point. They have a road closed sign. She goes there, and she notices a tree cutting service. They were removing trees out of the area, cutting them down, a local tree cutting service. And then she observes that. She goes, that's weird. She goes back to the firehouse. She starts telling them they had a tree cutting service down there. What's going on? The road was closed. I couldn't even get down there. All I could see is the tree cutting thing, chopping down trees and all this. She was like, that's weird. The other girl said, oh, I need to see this. So she heads down there. And by this point, it's like, you know, she got there say around like 11:30. This other girl gets there around like 11:45
And this
or
is
closer,
Robert. This is on the same night.
all the same night.
All
All
this
the same night.
commotion was going on the same night.
I haven't even told you what was going on at our house. This is just what was going on at the firehouse and at the actual crash site because my family, we never left our house. We couldn't because we had other visitors at my mother's house. All right. And that's a whole nother ball game. But so the other girl, she gets in her car. This would have been like 11:45, almost 12 o'clock. She gets there because it was a drive. It was a good drive. It was late at night, Sunday night. It was raining, cloud coverage. The roads weren't that good. Takes them a while to get back and forth. She gets there around 11:45, 12 a.m. at night, midnight, and the road is still closed. And she noticed a flatbed truck, a plain, not military, plain black flatbed truck with black tarp materials on the back. She could not see the materials. She just saw the lights of the flatbed truck going off, and she saw something large on the back of the flatbed truck, and it was tarped by black tarps. That's all she saw. Now, this tells us that they had everything cleared approximately around 12 a.m. midnight at night, which this will come into play later on in the story. She goes back to the firehouse. That was weird. They pulled something out of that creek. That's what she's telling the firefighters. Now, that's all the information I have at the actual crash site. Also, I know 2 or 3 days after the crash, my mother rode her bicycle down there. She saw all the foxtails and crops all laid out, etc. But I'll get into that later. Now, to that, before I get into my mother and our experience at our house, do you have any questions about the actual that situation?
Well, it sounds like it was. How did they know? How did they do this so fast if you're in the rural area? It sounds to me like somehow a lot of commotion going on at such a short time. and a lot of back and forth. I mean, to have that kind of truck,
Yeah.
it just sounds so suspicious, no?
They have a plan. As I mentioned, 5 years prior to this, Dover Air Force Base, the Coast Guard, now you see it connecting. The Coast Guard and the fire chief, they just saw blue lights flying. Nuclear plants are no-fly zones.
Yeah,
Anything flying over a nuclear plant is on our Air Force's radar. They
right.
know what's above it. And I found this article 5 years prior, and they are all talking to each other and getting a game plan together. That's how it happened so quick. They already had the phone numbers. They were already in hoots. Also, great question. Important to note this. When my aunt saw it at 10:18 p.m., even though the whole thing only happened 5 to 6 minutes and then this thing exploded,
Yeah.
no one knows how long that was sitting back there. It could have been sitting back there 20 minutes. It could have been sitting back there an hour. It was dark, cloudy, April. It could have been sitting over there for 2 hours or even more. There's no telling. And when I get to the part of what happened at my house, the same question you had, it really indicates that like they already knew it was there. And that's how they were already on the site before the firefighters. The Coast Guard was there, had the tarps on the ground, 40
Yeah.
minutes. How?
Yeah.
How?
If they were tracking it or they knew about it, because that kind of
They
response in
had
that
to.
that kind of response in that rural
I
area, it
mean,
didn't happen.
I'm a logical person. I know a lot of people, conspiracy theory. Oh, they teleported there, but I don't believe that. Not from the reports. I believe they knew about it. I don't think they teleported there. Same thing with the men in the black suits. Which before I get into that, Amanda, did you have any questions?
I'm waiting to get to the part about your mom and connecting with different ETs and all that fun stuff. So I'm waiting for that
All
because
right,
I have
so
a little story I can share about that. So
That's right.
can't wait to hear that. So yeah, so my mom. Let's go back now. That's what was going on at this crash site. At our house, my mom made the 911 call. As I said, the police came 10 minutes afterwards. 25 minutes later. Now, to go to what she was just saying, how did they get there so quick? The closest town where we would get our groceries, see our family, was 15, 20 minutes away. This part of New Jersey is divided by the Delaware River. You got to go north to go over the Delaware Bridge, then to go south to get to where we are. There's no straight path across. 25 minutes later, two black town cars pull into our driveway. My family didn't think it was strange. We just had an aircraft explode behind our house. Obviously, the government and media or whatever, they want to know about it. It wasn't weird to us. At no point up to this point was my family thinking extraterrestrials, aliens, or UFOs. They just witnessed something. They didn't understand how it could be flying. They didn't know much about planes or anything like that. But, they knew enough that when something that big explodes behind your house, it's going to get the attention of people, regardless, even if it's a little crop dust. All right. So 25 minutes later, these two black cars pull into our driveway. Out of the one car is a gentleman dressed in Air Force attire. Okay. Yeah, of course. Who else would come investigate this, right? It makes sense. It's not weird. Out the second car, two men wearing black suits and hats, no sunglasses. And once again, not weird. Government
Yep.
officials. That's what we. Why wouldn't they be there? We just witnessed something explode behind our back house
Yep.
that we can't. We couldn't even describe it. My mom never called it a helicopter. None of that stuff. We couldn't describe it. So they come up to the door. My mom lets them right in. No hesitation. Uh, they were a little excited to tell them, and also they were a little shooken up. We thought we were going to get hit by debris. It was terrifying to see that, and they let them right in. We go into the living room, the same living room that my mom and her two girlfriends was watching the Phillies baseball game. They come into the living room. The two men in black. We had a coffee table that sat in front of us, the old wooden coffee table. Two men in black stood in front of that. The gentleman in the Air Force stood kind of off in the wall. And the two men in black said, "Have a seat." My mom and her two girlfriends sat down, and they pulled out a notepad and a pencil, and they were holding the pencil really weird. They were holding the pencil so weird, and it's such a small detail, but so important because these characters don't really give a lot. They don't say a lot. They're there for a reason. They know what's going on, even when the experiencers have no clue what's going on. But they're just holding the pencil weird, and they look at my mom and her two girlfriends. They have the notepad and the pencil, and they ask, "Can you draw three different kinds of extraterrestrials?" This is 1991.
Just
Now,
like
my
that.
mother just, and super serious, not a smile on their face. And my mom's two girlfriends started laughing. They lost it. Ah, you're crazy. What are you talking? They're like, what's go-" They weren't having it. They didn't believe. Like I said, this is a Christian. It, we are not those kind of people. This is not a hippie area. These are country folks that go to church every Sunday. And as I said before, if you're not talking about Jesus, you're talking to the wrong people. It's country. That's where this area was. So they're laughing and laughing, and my mom was sitting there kind of silent. My mom was not laughing. My mom was not laughing at all. My mom was still really shooken up from everything, and she was quiet. At this point, I said 25 minutes later, they showed up. Crash happened at 10:18. 25 minutes later, we could say it was around, 10:45, 10:50, around there, whatever. And, you know, my mom and her girlfriends, the night prior, I have this documented. They were up until 4:30. They were all hanging out at a friend's house, up very late. So these two girls were tired, and they're just laughing, and the men in black just they didn't say anything. Stop laughing. They didn't say that. They were really locked in to my mom, because my mom wasn't laughing, and she just went really, really silent. And they say, "You ladies don't have to stay," and they're like, "We're tired. We've been up all night." I have this documented. They grab their purses as they're getting their coats. April raining, they're getting their coats, they're grabbing their purses, getting ready. They didn't think they were leaving my mom in danger. They just thought my mom would have to answer a bunch of questions about what they saw, fill out paperwork, yada, yada, yada. All right. So as they're getting ready, my mom picks up the notepad and the pencil, and she starts to draw three different kinds of extraterrestrials. I wish she would have never done that. That was her mistake. She didn't know what was going on. And after she did that, and my mom's drawings, they're not like the artists you see now making all these aliens. They were glorified stick figures. They were not exceptional. They were very basic beings, and I don't want to get too much into that, because I can explain all the beings she was in contact with. But like, imagine like your typical gray, your typical humanoid, your typical one she called the blues. It was something else. So it wasn't much of anything. It was chicken scratch. It was not the most beautiful artwork ever, but it was enough to let the two gentlemen dressed in black and the Air Force gentleman to know. As you mentioned, you said they already knew that thing was there. Why was it there is even a better question, is it not? Why was it there? And that's the question a lot of people don't ask. They just want to hear about the crash. And my mom was like, why was it there? And how long? And why was it there for so long, scoping out behind our house? 3.5-year-old young redheaded giant and a 22-year-old single mother living with her grandparents. Come on.
Yeah.
So the men in black, and the gentlemen wearing the black suits, I like calling them men in black. Everyone goes, but to me at the time, these are just men in black suits. That wasn't strange. We've been to weddings, we've been to funerals, people will wear black suits and hats. It's not weird at this point.
Yeah.
Then they take my mother. After her two girlfriends leave, I had a playroom upstairs. It was more isolated, not big like a living room. It was very small. They laid my mom down and they did a very brief. The Air Force gentlemen, not the men in black. Once they went upstairs, the men in black, they went to the side of the room, and the Air Force gentleman kind of took control of the situation. And they did a very brief regression therapy with my mother, no longer than 5 to 6 minutes. And a lot of people say, wait, the Air Force guy was doing regression therapy in 1991? Well, yeah, soldiers that go through post traumatic stress disorder, they're in a combat situation, something happens to their platoon, they lose soldiers, and the US government needs to know what that soldier remembers for intel. They pull in regression therapists to get that information out. They absolutely use it. And that is so important. And a lot of people are unaware of this, but any veteran with post traumatic stress disorder, they know this to be real and true. So, with that being said, real brief. And in that real brief regression, unfortunately, and I mean this, unfortunately, I wish my mom would have just not said anything, honestly, truthfully. Even if I wouldn't be here today talking about aliens and UFOs, I would have been happier for it. I don't care. They don't affect me. I don't care about these things, even if I am connected to them. They don't pay my bills. They don't do this for me. I'm a real person. I have a real life. I got a family. I don't care about aliens or UFOs. But unfortunately, my mom said too much. Too much. She was talking about being sucked out of her room through a white beam of light, taken onto a craft with cold tables, seeing tall white gray extraterrestrials and smaller gray extraterrestrials that she had names. She had names for all these beings, pet names. When she was explaining to me as a kid, she had cute little pet names. But with the regression, she was just talking about this one abduction experience she had, and these tall white, she called them tall whites. They were tall gray extraterrestrials, very tall, 7 foot, about my height, 6'8", 7 foot, maybe 7.5. Very tall, very lanky, slim, kind of look like me if you think about it. And they had very light skin. They weren't grays. It was like white skin, but they looked just like a gray extraterrestrial. But certain parts of them very humanoid, hybridization, etc. They've been working on the genetic code for a while. So she talked about that one abduction in this little regression. And like I said, the men in black were standing off to the side and they heard enough, 5 to 6 minutes. It was really brief. They take my mom back downstairs, and keep in mind, my mom, for the first time in her life, just had the realization when they did that regression. She didn't understand what she was drawing. When she drew those three extraterrestrials, she just kind of, okay, this is what I think. She didn't realize why she was drawing those extraterrestrials. She didn't understand none of it. When she had the regression, it was the first time in her life that she realized that these things had been taking her. Not only then, since she was the baby up until the day she died. You know, the only
Wow.
difference was after that first regression, when these things would happen again, she would remember it. Before the regression, strange dreams, strange markings on her body, strange scars since childhood, etc. She didn't think, my grandmother, oh, you must have scratched yourself in your sleep. It was just a bad nightmare, honey. Don't worry about it. My grandmother dismissed everything. But up to that regression, it
Click.
something clicked. Awakening.
Yeah.
That awakening moment, that was my mother's awakening moment. 22-year-old single mother, after seeing some sort of aircraft that looked just like this explode behind her house, having strange men she's never met before, authority figures, Air Force gentlemen, two government officials wearing black suits. We'll call them that. I like saying different names. Men in Black gets old. So, it it was a lot of pressure on my young single mom, and she was, as any good mom, young single mom, my child, right? So they go back downstairs, and the men in black, and this is where stuff gets like everything seems all right, right? They haven't done anything wrong. Some people might be watching this and say, well, they helped your mother remember everything. Okay, everything seems okay at this point. This is where stuff gets a little rocky, you know? They go back downstairs into the living room. They tell my mother she's just realizing all this. She's processing. She has no idea what just happened in that regression. She has no idea what she just saw explode. She is loopy. All right. And they said, do you have any questions? 22-year-old high school graduate, no university, out in the middle of the country. Do you have any questions? Of course they would. I love it. Anyway, my mom said, yeah, I do have questions. And my mother had three simple questions that any mother would ask in this situation. And some people have heard this story and like, oh, she should have asked this. Well, no, that's fantastical storytelling. I'm telling you what a real mother, real single mother at 22 years old would ask if they were really in this situation and they cared about their children. And because of what she said in her regression, they got the ammunition they needed to know how to respond to my mother to keep her hush hush. So the first question my mother asked these gentlemen from the government in black suits and black hats, no facial hair, which a lot of times you hear men in reports, they say, oh, no facial hair. When's the last time you've seen a government official that has a beard like this, or a military personnel that has a beard like this? They're all clean shaved. So to say, oh, the men in black are clean shaved, like they all are. So once again, that's more like brainwashing. You could see a politician, military personnel, and a men in black, put them side by side. They all look the same. They're all clean shaved. Some of them may have less eyebrows or whatever. I don't know what was under the hat. The men in black didn't take their hat off, and they weren't wearing sunglasses. It was raining 10:18 at night. So, they looked human. They acted weird, and I'll get more into that. So, first question my mother asked was, are these things dangerous? Being a good mother, are these things dangerous? Is my family in trouble, because something happened to my son, etc.? So my mom's simple question, are these things dangerous? The men in black replied, if they were dangerous, do you think we would still be here? What do you say to that? You can't say anything, right?
Right.
What, what what do you say to that? My mom said, okay, I guess that makes sense. It it's such a tricky, it's not correct, but this is how they work. This is how they work. Second question my mom had for them. Why don't people know about these things? Why don't I know about these things? Why don't my child know about these things? Why don't all the people watching this know about these things? And this one is huge, 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 huge. The Men in Black replied, "We're doing everything we can by preconditioning, and within the next 10 years," this was 1991 to 2000. We all know what happened then, not going to get into it. So, the next 10 years, you will see signs of extraterrestrials and UFOs in all sorts of media, newspapers, media outlets, movies, music, etc. My mom said, "Okay, that makes sense." And then she started thinking in her head, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Communion, like some of these older movies and whatnot. And she's, Star Wars.
Mhm.
You just got kind of in her brain. She's like, "Oh, you kind of have been telling us." But as I mentioned, X Files came out 1 year after this situation. About 6 years later, the movie Men in Black came out, and my mom and I watched that, and we were laughing not because it was a funny movie. We were laughing because the Men in Black told us they would be making that franchise. And we could never imagine that they would make it a comedy because no one was laughing in my family's situation. And these are sinister, manipulative, fractions. I don't even know what to call them.